Is this your screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So, dear participants, I welcome Dr. Prachi Sirsagar ma'am for this today's second lecture. Dear participants, we have with us Dr. Prachi Sirsagar, Assistant Professor in Botany, Modern College of Science and Commerce, Autonomous College, Ganesh Kind, Pune. She has completed her PhD degree in 2012 from Government Vidarbha Institute of Science and Humanities, Amravati. She has also attended various short-term courses, and she has near about 15 years of teaching experience for UG and PG. And she has also worked as a project associate at Agarkar Research Institute, Pune. She has completed 4 research projects, namely digitized inventory of medicinal plant resources of Maharashtra, funded by Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission, Mumbai. Seed and seedling morphology of important medicinal plant, funded by Agarkar Research Institute. Then nanomaterial treatment of seed for enhancing seed germination, funded by Agarkar Research Institute. And eco restoration of Pushkarni and River Ram near Someshwar Temple Complex, Baner, funded by the Kirloskar Vasundhara Club, Pune. She has also published near about 15 research publications in national and international journals. She has also presented papers in national and international conferences. One book is published, and one training handbook. She has also delivered hands-on training for 10 different workshops. She has also delivered talk in workshop, FDPs, and at various conferences. She has also received certain awards, specifically SB Jain Prize, then prize for photo presentation, then poster presentation in national conferences. Again, she has also a life member of various academic bodies, especially Indian Association of Angiosperm Taxonomy, then Medicinal and Aromatic Plants Association of India, and many more. So she has a very huge experience of delivering talk and organizing certain workshop. She has also organized awareness campaign, organized various workshop. Again, she has also delivered audio-visual lectures for the research students as well as her students. So, dear participants, today we have with us a very renowned personality, Dr. Prachi Sirsagar from Pune. So, I welcome Dr. Prachi on behalf of all the participants and behalf of Research Committee, Science College, Nanded. So, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
And now I request Dr. Prachi to start your presentation. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the brief introduction. I hope my screen is visible. Very
Yes.
Good morning to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, ma'am.
So very good morning to all. First of all, I'm thankful to the
Good
Science College Nanded for providing me this opportunity to interact with the research scholars from the Science College. And today I'm going to talk about the two topics. One is the qualitative analysis of the qualitative data and the analysis of the quantitative data. So both these, how we are going to analyze the data, and by using the various tools, how we can make our data more and more appropriate. That particular aspect we are going to see today. So before we move ahead with the presentation, I will talk a little bit about the qualitative, what is the meaning of qualitative and the quantitative data separately, and how we can gather this type of the data, in which type of the research we can use the qualitative and the quantitative data. And at the last, then we'll see how the data can be analyzed by using the various tools. Okay. So these are these are certain points I will try to cover during my presentation. That introduction to these different types of the data analysis, the characters of this data, importance of the data, methods of the collection, and last we'll talk about the analysis and advantages. So at first, whether we'll talk about the quantitative and the qualitative data, when we are talking about the qualitative data, so there are the certain hypotheses regarding the qualitative and the quantitative data too. So the Fred Kellinger, he says there is no such a things that the qualitative data. He says there is everything is existed in either a zero or there is a one. Okay, so we can't say a research data is in between in the qualitative way. And the DT camp, he says all the research ultimately has a qualitative grounding. Okay, so you do any type of the research, these are the two opinions from these two scientists. One said the data should be, there should not be any qualitative type of the data. There is some figures will be there and the data should be fitted into the figures. Okay. So, and the others, they will say that, yeah, no, there can, whatever the data is there, whether you collect the data either in the form of numbers from 0 to 1 or whenever you are going to interpret the data, we have to interpret it in a qualitative, on the qualitative ground. So these are the different approaches by the different scientists, but they arrive at the same destiny. Okay. So what, first we'll see what is the meaning of the qualitative research. Qualitative research is nothing but the development of the concepts which help us to understand the social phenomena in a more natural way rather than the experimental ways. So, and it gives the more emphasis to the meaning, experiences, and views of the participants. So, this type of the data, it usually observes and describes the processes or the phenomenon to get the deeper understanding or the knowledge of the particular subject rather than doing some experimental work in the research. Okay, so qualitative data is more and more related in observing the processes, in listing the observations and to understand the process in the detail. So this type of the research is usually used to generate certain hypotheses, and that hypothesis then can be used for further study. So first one has to observe, and that observations has to converted into the hypothesis, and then that hypothesis has to be studied. That is the main way in studying the qualitative research. So as it is saying the quality, it is more explanatory way, and that's why it helps in understanding the individual perceptions regarding the data. Okay, so and here individual, they can pursue the non-numerical data, so that as the data is non-numerical, it is the descriptive one. So there can be the videos, so data can be collected in the form of videos, there can be the photographs, or there can be the recording from the peoples, and these data which is collected, um, that data can be collected either through the interviews and then it get analyzed uh, by different theories, which we'll see later on. Okay. So what is the importance or why the qualitative research is important? Because these type of the data, it looks at the how and why type of the human decision making. Okay. It looks the phenomena in a very natural way and doesn't manipulate any variable. Okay. In the quantitative data, the numbers can be manipulated, but here in a qualitative research, one cannot manipulate the views of an individual or a perception of the of a particular individual regarding any of the experiment or any of the context on which we are going to focusing our research idea. So that's why this data is help us to develop the concepts and the theories and it helps in understanding the social world. So any of the effect or any of the process we can understand through the people's perspective, through the qualitative research. So it is a non-numerical type of the data, descriptive data. It involves collecting and then analyzing the non-numerical waves or the non-numerical data. So that will help us understanding the concepts, opinions, and the experiences of the people on particular uh, process, we can say. So qualitative data is also called as the categorical data, and these, as it is the categorical data, we say that data can be grouped according to the categories or in a different categories. Okay, that categories has to uh, decide by the researcher who is going to design a research problem. So this is the, it refers to the words or the labels which we are going to use to describe a certain characteristic or the trait of that particular problem. So there are three main dimensions in the qualitative research. One is understanding the context, understanding the people's perspective, and understanding the interactions. So understanding the context means how economical, political, social, cultural, environmental, or organizational factors influencing the health. This is the understanding one context. Suppose uh, we are talking about any of the health issue or the disease, then uh, understanding that particular context, then understanding the people's perspective, the how people will make the sense of their experiences of health and the disease, or understanding the interactions, how the various actors involved in these different public health activities interact with each other. So any of the problem will be taken into consideration, and then these are the three dimensions are considered in a qualitative research. uh, Maybe the problems are going to vary. This is a simple example of qualitative and the quantitative data. Suppose here you can see these are the two paintings. If a researcher is doing a qualitative research and he is collecting the qualitative data, then it is more and more related to the descriptions. So data can be observed, but it cannot be measured in terms of the qualitative data. If it is a quantitative data, then it can be measured. Okay. So suppose uh, a X person is working on the qualitative research, then and he is collecting the qualitative data, then for the same oil painting, he will write the description about the colors used in the painting, what are the different types of the color, or how the beautiful these particular frame is, or the smells, or the old, or the musty, or textures of the brush, or the how the strokes are given, okay, what pictures are drawn, how the pictures are drawn, okay, beautiful scene which is looking, or it will describe that particular painting. But if it is the quantitative data, then researcher will measure the size of that particular painting, that how much is the size of the frame, okay, dimensions of the frame, weight of the frame, then how many different numbers of the colors are used, cost of that particular painting, okay, surface area of the painting. So quantitative measures are used in the this quantitative data. Okay, so quantitative data is collected either in the form of length, height, area, volume, weight, speed, time, temperature, anything. Usually in the sciences, we are working on the quantitative data than the qualitative data. For very few problems, we are working on the qualitative data, or uh, there are only a single aspect from the, a single objective from the entire objectives. One objective is related to the qualitative data, but our most of the objectives are related to the quantitative type of the data. This is another simple example of the qualitative and the quantitative data. So if it is the qualitative data, then if the strawberries are kept and I was asked to describe this data, then in a qualitative data will write about the characteristics of these strawberries, that these strawberries are sweet, they are delicious one, they are certain are green, certain are red, some are large, some are blue. This type of the descriptions will be written. So descriptive data or the qualitative data is the open-ending data. We can write more and more characters in the qualitative data. Quantitative data will give us the fixed number or the fixed figure, that 10 strawberries are there. Of these 10, 6 are red, 4 are green. Okay, or weight of that strawberry, or number of leaves present over there. Such type of the numerical data is the quantitative type of the data. Okay. Again, to understand these in a more to understand these problems, there is another example in these qualitative data. Suppose a student is reading a paragraph and a teacher has to give the marks to the, or analyze that particular student. And if teacher is going to give the marks to that particular student on his reading practice or how is he reading the paragraph, then it is the quantitative data. But if the teacher will just give some feedback on its fluency, how he talked, how beautiful he read, how correctly he read the paragraph, then such a explanatory data is called as the descriptive type of the data. Okay. So there may be the question arise in your mind, when will you choose the qualitative data for the research work? So if the objective of your research study is to disseminate the knowledge, to understand the concept or the thought and the experiences regarding a particular experiment or regarding a particular scenario, then in that case, we can use the qualitative type of the research work. So because this type of the research work is mainly focused on creating the ideas and formulating the theories or the hypothesis. So this research is most often used in the humanities and the social sciences, as I earlier told you. In a pure sciences, this type of the qualitative research we are using less. So few example of again the qualitative data research we want to see. Suppose and always there are the how and the why type of the questions are asked. How do employees decide when it's time to transition to a new career? That can be the one of the problems. Or how does social media usage affect the mental health of the teenagers? So here, to understand this particular problem or to solve this particular question, how the social media is going to affect the mental health of the teenagers, we have to take the interviews, we have to listen to the different teenagers, their perspective about the social media, and then we have to conclude. Here, we can, it is difficult to collect the data in the form of numbers. So characteristics of the qualitative data is, it's a descriptive type of the data. It describes the objectives and it's a non-judgmental way. It is very detailed data which will give an account in words with full particulars about the particular problem. It is always open-ended, having no determined limit or boundary, because individual's perspective is different regarding the same situation or the same problem. Everyone's understanding, their opinion can vary. That's why the data is open-ended. It is non-numerical. It is it doesn't have any numbers. It's subjective, which is based on or influenced by personal feelings, taste, or opinions. Okay. So we cannot fix here a fixed frame of the question or the fixed answers. because the opinions are going to vary person to person. So it allows the people or the researcher to form the parameters through which a larger data sets can be observed. This type of the data is about the emotions or the perceptions of the people, what they are going to feel. Uh, in the quantity, if it is the quantitative type of the data, then these perceptions and the emotions may be documented. Like we are giving the feedback in the different stars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So whether we feel that particular, suppose you are listening a lecture and you have to give the stars to the lecture, good, better, best, then we are giving 1, 2, 3, 4 type of the stars. Then we are quantifying the data in the form of numbers, that how many stars or how much is the rating to that particular uh, talk or the problem. But if it's the qualitative, then it's only we are talking about the description, whether it's a good, it's a better, or it is the best. So that is called as the qualitative uh, type of the data. This type of the this qualitative data is again more and more important in the market research, to understand the consumer's language, to understand the consumer's perspective or consumer's view in using a particular product. Suppose a newer product is released in the market and consumers are using, what is the view of the consumers in using that particular product, whether they like the product or they don't like the product. Uh, if they like the product, then what are the reasons they like, and if they don't like, what are the reasons why the people don't like that particular product. So, and when such a data is collected, this data will gives the consumer's perspective regarding that particular product, and this will benefited to the that particular industry who made that particular product. What are the problems people are facing whenever they are using that particular product, so that the company can uh, at either if it is possible, they can change the product or they can modify the product. So in the market research, qualitative research is used more than the quantitative type of the research. So there are the various methods in collecting the qualitative data. As it's a non-numerical type of the data or non-numerical information, so it has to collect in the form of words, images, observations, to understand the individual's attitudes, their behaviors, their beliefs, motivations in a specific context. Again, it seeks to understand the social phenomenon through in-depth exploration and analysis of people's perspectives, people's experiences, and the different narratives they are going to give. Uh, One has to be very specific whenever he is going to collect the qualitative data, okay? Because it's a subjective data, it's a descriptive type of the data, it's open-ended data, unstructured. Though we are going to frame a questionnaire in these while collecting the data, if you are making a questionnaire, still the answers or the views whatever given by the different person, that may be a different one. So the data is more and more unstructured type of the data. That's why how to collect the data, what methods should be used, that for researchers has to be very particular if he is working on the qualitative research analysis or research. So these are the various methods which are usually used in the qualitative data collection method. And through all these method of qualitative data collection methods, usually we are getting the primary data. So collection methods, they are mainly focused on the getting the insights, reasoning, and the motivation. So individual interviews or the qualitative surveys, focus group dimensions, record keepings, case studies, observations, they are the different type of the methods in qualitative data collection method, which are commonly used and which will give the primary type of the data. And then as it's the primary data, it helps in making the hypothesis, and later on it can be used for the further study. So first method in qualitative uh, data analysis is the one-to-one interview, where which is commonly used method in the qualitative research, because one-to-one interview, when we are saying, as we are taking the people's perspective in the qualitative research, it's a very personal approach. The research is going to collect the data directly from the interviewers on one-to-one basis, and interview methods, either they are the informal interview or unstructured, or it can be the conversational. So that conversation is between the two person. That's why it is called as the one-to-one interview method. Again, open-ended questions can be asked very spontaneously, with the interviewers letting the flow of the interview dictate the questions to be asked. Okay. So for example, if anybody is going to collect the data or doing the survey uh, on a particular aspect, then in that type of the survey type of the analysis, we are going to follow the method of one-to-one interview. There are three different types of the interviews according to this Mary. The interviews are unstructured or open-ended, or it can be semi-structured, or it can be the structured one. Unstructured or open-ended means which are mainly focused on the participants' own perceptions on the particular event or the process or the phenomenon which is going to get studied. It's individual opinion, individual's perception about that particular uh, process. So in these type of the interview, it often takes the form of different conversation, and it's undertaken with the intention that researcher explores with the participants whatever is his idea or the beliefs or the views about a certain event. If it is the semi-structured interviews, then these type of the interviews are commonly used, where the research projects are to corroborate the data emerging from the other data sources. So here, usually it requires the participant to answer a set of predetermined questions. According to the problem, the researcher has to already set a questionnaire, it has to uh, set different questions, and it is expected that the interviewers will give the answer to these all the questions. So here, in a semi-structured form, interviewers will not allowed to clarify the answers. Okay, if he has given the answer in yes or no, then the clarification is usually not asked, or in case of the semi-structured type of the interview. Okay, so that's why during the semi or in the structured interview, if we say, then questions may be detailed and in developed in very well advanced. Here, researcher is having a very good knowledge or the idea about the problem he has chosen, and that's why he will frame a very particular questions to get the thorough knowledge about the problem. So this method is frequently used in multiple case studies, or when the sample group is quite large, and whenever he is getting the data through these type of the interviews, it will he ensures that the researcher ensures that there should be the consistency in the data. Another method of the data collection is the focus group, where a limited, so if it's a one-to-one interview, usually the number of how many people are going to interview, that number may not be fixed by the researcher. Okay. Uh, but if it's a focus group, then it includes a group of people or the respondent that may be varied from the targeted group. The main aim in the focus group is to find the answers to the question like why, what, and the how type of the question. And an important thing in the focus type of the interview is the researchers don't need to interact with the groups in a person. And nowadays, this method is very commonly used method. Again, as far as the market research are considered on the new products or the testing of the new concept, then usually the online survey forms are sent, and there are a set of questions are there on the survey form, and the those who are going to give the answers, or the all these people who are participating in the process, they are giving their responses on the questionnaire. Just it is very simple, just by clicking the yes no type of the answers, one can give the answers to the focus in the focus group type of the data. In the record keeping, it makes the use of existing reliable documents or the already documented information or the similar sources of the information as the data source, and that already available information or the documents which are already there, that can be used in a new researcher, or the researcher will interpret that data or collection of these data in his perspective, and then that can be used in a new research. So he may with the same data, he may come up with the new hypothesis. He can give his own perspective or his own hypothesis based on these earlier existing data, and the newer research, that data can be used in the newer research. So it's very similar type of the exercise that a person is going in the library and he's going to read the different reference material, different books he's referring, and collecting the relevant data which can be used in the research. So that is called as the record keeping. Another method, that is the observation, which is a very traditional method in the qualitative data collection method, that researcher has to observe the subject in the course of his regular routine. One can say years of his experiment, takes the detailed field notes, and are recording the subjects via a video or the audio. So this type of the observation method, it is useful when you want to gain a more refined understanding about the participant in their natural environment. Okay? Suppose you have launched a new product, and when the product will come in the market and people are going to use that particular product, what will be the first reaction of that consumer or that particular person after the use of that particular product? Then one can capture that emotions and the reactions and the interactions of that particular person. Then such type of the data, it is called as the observation type of the data. Whether by looking towards that product, the person was happy or he was not happy, or whether he liked that particular product or he don't like, what is his expression after looking towards that product. Such a type of the methods are called as the observational methods. Again, useful in the market research more. So observations is the part of that experiment. What we also do in the quantitative method also, we do the observations, we having the experiments and we are writing the observations, but usually it is in the form of the numbers. But here it is not in the form of a number, it is in the form of the words or the emotions, can say. An example is, suppose if you want to see the example in the observation method, a researcher has given a one puzzle to solve a group of people. One group of people is sitting in a hot room and other group of the people is sitting in a cold room. Then researcher is going to observe that in which room the people are more stressed while solving the puzzle, and then he interpret whether in the cold room the people were quite happy and it was easy for them to solve the puzzle, or the people were more stressed in the hot room, that may be because of the condition over there. So such a type of the different problem is thought and it is analyzed in a different angles through the observation. So if person is using an observation as a part of any experiment, then the primary method is to perform the experiment and secondary method is to note down the observation. So this is what we usually do with our research. We set a experiment and then we write down the observations. So there are the two methods in the observations. One is the covert observation and other is the overt observation. Coverts are those where researchers are concealed and they don't know that they are being observed, then it is covert. And if the researcher or the participants, they know they are under the observation and they are studying, then it is called as the overt type of the observations. A recently introduced method in the qualitative research data collection method is the case study research. It is the in-depth study about a particular problem. Either it is a person or a group or the event, but in case of the case study, nearly every aspect of the subject of life or the history is analyzed to seek the pattern and the causes of the behavior. Okay. For example, in the science also we do many of the case studies. We are observing the impact. Suppose we are observing the impact of the climate change or the impact of the polluted water in the nearby community, then such a type of the detailed observation where we are doing, then we call it as the case study type of the research. Suppose we are looking towards the problem as what is the impact of polluted river or the polluted river water near on the nearby community, then in a case study the researcher will study everything about that problem. What is the source for the pollution of the water, which contaminants are more, which contaminants are affecting the people more, what type of the problem people are facing because of that polluted water, such type of all these questions. So, and when such a type of the studies are done, it can be done in all the fields, whether it's a psychology, medicine, political science, social work, education, anthropology, any of the thing. So recently, this is the very commonly used method in the analysis. And once he will collect all this data, he can give the good interpretation or the cause of that particular problem. So that once he will get the idea or reason for the cause of that problem, then another researcher can find out the how to solve that particular issue. So that is called as the case study type of the research. So up till now, we have seen the different ways of the data collection. Then, what is the meaning of the data analysis? Okay, because in the research, we are collecting more and more data, but and whenever we are collecting the data is not a organized one. Okay, we are just collecting the data, we are note down the observations, but we cannot present only that observations. Whatever the interviews or the survey form we have made, we cannot show all these survey form to or write our report in the form of that survey form. Okay, or we cannot just submit the survey form. We have to, whatever the data we have collected, we have to analyze that data. We have to come up with some conclusion. We have to come up with some interpretation to that data. So that is called as the data analysis. Okay, Lecompte and Sensu, they say research data analysis is a process which is used by the researchers to reduce a huge data to a we have to narrow down that huge data either in the form of a small story, or we have to interpret it to derive some insights which will give some insights about the collected data. So here we have to process that large data. We have to reduce that data into a large chunk of data into the smaller fragments, which will make sense or which will help in understanding the data more. So these qualitative data analysis, it starts with knowing its two basic technique, but there are no rules for that. One approach, it is called as the deductive approach, and second approach, it is called as the inductive approach in the data analysis. Deductive approach involve the analyzing qualitative data based on the structure that is predetermined by the researcher. So that is called as the deductive approach. So here researcher can use the questions as a guide for analyzing the data. Whatever the question he has framed and he has collected the data, then this data is based on structure of that predetermined survey sheet or predetermined questionnaire, and by taking the help of the questionnaire, he can deduce the approach. So this is quite quick and easy approach used when the researchers has a very fair idea about the likely responses they are getting from the people or from the sample population. Okay, or only if it's a just yes or no type of the data, or researcher has some idea what type of the answers he will get through these questions, then this is called as the deductive type of the approach. Inductive approach is not based on the predetermined structure or set ground rules or the framework. Here, researcher may have a very little bit idea, or he may not have any idea about the research phenomenon, or what type of the answers he will get to his predetermined set of questions, or uh, it may possible that he is not able to take all the answers through the predetermined question set on the spot or on time, and so he may need to ask, or some spontaneous question may arise. So there is no structures or the framework in the inductive type of the approach. That's why, as there is no fixed frame structure, there is a very little bit idea about the perceptions. That's why analyze this approach is more time consuming approach in the qualitative data analysis. So when one has to analyze the qualitative data, these are the main ways in analyzing. First is the collection of the data, then so that data either collected through the observation, interviews, by through the recording, or by doing some referencing through the documents, one can collect that data. Then whatever the data is collected, it has to reduce, it has to simplify, it has to transform into the way that one can interpret it. Whatever the reduced data sets are there or the data is there, it has to display either in the form of matrices, graphs, networks, or the charts, so that it will be easily accessible, or people can understand it in a better way. Okay? And at last, very important is what is the conclusion drawn by the researcher through his observations or his collection of this data, and what he confirmed from it, what is his conclusion, what idea he got through his data collection, whether he has verified the data, everything he has to give in the last. That is called as the qualitative data analysis. So in this qualitative data analysis, a very first step is the uh, arrangement of the data. So once we have framed our question of research and we have collected the data, a very big and important task is to arrange that data. Okay? The collection of the data is quite easier than analyzing and the interpreting the data. Okay? If we want to interpret the data, if we have analyzed the data very well, then interpretations and the conclusions or the results are quite easy. It is depending how accurately you are analyzing the data. Depending on that, the interpretations are quite easy, or we can get a very accurate interpretation if we can arrange the data or analyze the data in a proper way. So very first requisite is arrange all the collected data in a very structured manner. So whenever we are collecting, it is unclear, it is unstructured. So collect it. Arrange that data is the first stage. And so researcher must transcribe that data before analyzing that particular data. Once we have arranged that data, transfer and arrange all this data is to organize that data. So to organize the data in a best way is to again think back of our research goal. What was the research goal we have designed? Okay, and now to answer that research goal, accordingly we have to organize the data. So the data has to organize based on the research questions we have asked. Okay, whatever the question we have asked, it should correlate with that. Then set up a code to that particular collected data. If we are able to set up some codes to that data, it is very easy to interpret that data or to analyze that data in each of the context. So setting up your appropriate codes for the collected data gets you one step very closer to the analysis. So coding is one of the effective methods for compressing a massive amount of the data. When data is a very large or the huge data, then we can give some codes to that data. So on the basis of the coding, one can get the idea. Okay, so when we code the data, the descriptions, they become very shorter. So that is called as the coding. It allows the researcher to derive the theory from the relevant research finding. Fourth step is validate the data. Whatever the qualitative data we have collected, the success of these analysis is required the validation of the data. So that validation can be done throughout the research process. It is not possible that whatever the data is collected at once, it will get validated at last. So validating the data has the two sides. One is the accuracy of the research design and reliability how well the approaches deliver the accurate data. And at last is the concluding the analysis process. So finally conclude your data in a presentable report. So we have gathered the data, we have given some codes to the data, we have reduced it, and at the last, when we are going to write the report, that data should be in a presentable form, so that through the data we get the idea about the questions which is asked by the researchers. So these reports should describe your research methods, their pros and cons, whatever the limitations were there in the answering the research problem, whatever your findings, interferences, and what is the scope to the particular research in the future. That is all the part which is come into the conclusion. Nowadays, there are various uh, online tools are there, online softwares are there through which we can analyze the data very well, or we can interpret the data very well. So many of the data analysis tools are available, softwares are available. Uh, so there are the 5 types in the qualitative analysis. There are many types in the qualitative analysis. There are many subtypes are also there in the analysis, but these are the main types of the analysis. One is the content analysis, second is the narrative, third discourse, grounded, and the thematic analysis. These are the 5 types. Content analysis is the method which is more subjective interpretations of the context or the content of text through the systematic classification process. Okay. So suppose in the content analysis, a question is asked about the study about the student needs. Such a type of the question is asked, or university's Facebook page content analysis. Then one has to decide the themes. Okay, so themes are, so if we are asking the question about the student needs, then student, as the student group is there, they may have some academic needs and they may have some non-academic needs. So depending on that, if the students are talking about the financial issues, they are talking about the swimming pool, then these are the non-academic issues which are faced by the students. Or there are some issues like access to the journals or the books, if they are not getting something from the universities or the institutions, that are the academic needs of the people. So in these content analysis, these methods for the subjective interpretation of the content of the text through the systematic classification of the process of coding and identifying the themes or the patterns. Okay. So here coding is important. So here they have used these 2 themes, or we can say the codes, so non-academics and academics. In the narrative analysis, these approaches use, or it is typically focused on the lives of the individuals as told through their own stories. So it's a narrative descriptions are there where people have given their own stories, they are told their own interpretation. So that's what it is called. They are in these analysis, the focus is on the lives of individuals as they have told during the data collection. Discourse analysis is the method of studying how the people use languages in a different situations to understand what they really mean or what message they are sending. Okay, so discourse analysis is usually help to understand how languages are used to create a social relationship and the cultural norms. Okay. That's why in discourse analysis it examines the different languages which are used in the various forms of communications like spoken or the written, visual, or we can say a multimodal text are there, which mainly focused on language which is used to construct a relationship or to construct a spatial meaning in the problem. So that is called as the discourse type of the analysis. Grounded theory is again one of the approach in the qualitative research methodology, where it attempts in unrevealing the meaning of people's interactions, people experiences, and the social actions which are taken up by the people. That analysis is done through the grounded theory. And last is the thematic analysis, where the methods for identifying, analyzing the patterns in the data by a thematic code. Some codes are given and through which the data get analyzed. Okay. So, for example, in this thematic analysis, it is the 6-step thematic analysis, where single theme is the individual participation. And codes, suppose here the codes which are used are active, willing, accountable, responsible, or the motivated. So here the step 1 is gathering your data. Step 2 is read all your data from the beginning to the end, whether it looks interesting or you are finding some interesting things when you read the data. Depending on that, you can code the data in a different on the basis of different codes and what the data is about. Next is create the new codes to encapsulate the potential themes. Okay, and then you can take a pause and then evaluate your themes for good fit, where in which theme you can put your data and gives the analysis. Okay. So this is about the different uh, types of the qualitative analysis. At the last, we'll see what are the advantages of this qualitative data analysis. So very important thing, or what we understand up till now, is we are getting the in-depth information about the attitude, behavior, okay, or leading to the deeper understanding of the researcher. That in-depth data we can get about in the qualitative research. There is a flexibility in the qualitative research, that because these methods allow the researcher to modify the questions to change the direction if the new information. So whenever unframed or unstructured questions we are asking, and if we are getting some newer dimensions, then the researcher has the flexibility to change his method, to change his approach in collecting the data. Contextualization is there in the qualitative research that helps to provide a deep understanding of the experiences and the perspective of the people. Through these type of the collection method, one can collect the rich data, detailed data, and at the same time, when we are working on the qualitative data, whatever the question we have framed, we'll get some additional information also through these qualitative analysis, and then that another data also we can use in the in our research problem, which will give some newer insights through the qualitative research. And though we say it's a qualitative method, it's not related to the numbers more, but still we can get the numerical data through the qualitative research also. Okay, for example, you did a survey of a particular community, then you are getting the if you did a survey of 100 people, that out of the 100 people, there are 50% people maybe the old age, 50% maybe the younger one. So that number we are getting, so automatically the we are getting more and more data through the qualitative research. we can say it's a more authentic experience and the behaviors we can note down through the qualitative analysis. Here more and more engagement is there through the community because the interviewers, focus groups, they involve the active meeting with these participants, and which will give them deeper understanding about the problem. Okay, so always in a qualitative research, whatever the thought process is there in the researcher mind, that make it change when every day whenever he is collecting the data and he is getting a newer information about that particular data. So it is often occurs in a realistic settings, providing the more authentic experiences and the behaviors. So here the first topic is complete. I will not say thank you because I have to continue with the next topic. What is meaning of the quantitative data and how we can uh, calculate or how we can do the analysis in the quantitative data. Is there any questions here on the qualitative, or I can go ahead?
Yes, ma'am, no doubt.
So can I go ahead with the next topic?
Yes, ma'am.
I will take a 1 minute break. Is this screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So I will start with the next topic. This is the quantitative data analysis and how we can uh, present the quantitative data. So first we'll see what is the quantitative data means. Okay, now we have seen the qualitative data. Now next is what is the quantitative data. So quantitative data is the data which can be counted, which can be measured or quantified and given in a numerical value. Okay. So usually during the experimentation uh, or when we are doing the experiments, we usually get the data in the form of a quantity. Okay. So especially in the pure sciences, usually we are getting the new data in the form, in the numerical form only. Okay. Suppose I am studying the effect of a particular chemical on the germination of a seed or on the growth of the plant species, then in the growth or in the germination, I'm going to get the numbers over there. So how many percentage of the seeds get germinated, how many percent seeds were viable. So usually this data is in the form of the numbers. Okay. That so such a data is called as the quantitative data, where the quantity is measured, where quantity is known. And that's why, as it is in a form of a number, it is in the form, it is the structured type of the data, and such type of the data are very easy to analyze by the statistical analysis or by using the various type of analysis. So here again, it is easy to analyze and interpret quantitative type of the data compared to the qualitative data. So if you have questions like how many, how often, then here in such a type of the question, we will get the answer in the form of a number. So we will be able to find the answers in the quantitative data. It can be fixed, it can be universal, or it can be the factual type of the data. And in the quantitative type of the data, whenever the data is gathered or measured by performing certain experiments, then it is data is gathered by measuring or counting the things. So in that way, we can measure the data by the two main types. One is called as the discrete type of the data, and other one is called as the continuous type of the data. So any of the experiments, we are getting the data either in the form of discrete or it is a continuous type of the data. So first we'll see what is the meaning of discrete type of the data. So it is the data which can only take on certain numerical values. Okay. So certain means here the numerical values are fixed. We cannot broke down or we cannot give the data in a range. Okay. When the data is in a discrete form, we cannot give the data in a range. It is a fixed value. Okay. So whenever you are counting something, it is always the discrete type of the data. Okay, so that count is in the form of a number. Here you can see in this particular photograph, here the insect scavenger hunt tally chart is there. So here we can see the numbers. So ladybugs is in a 6 number, ant is in a 13, butterfly are 4. So fixed number is there, and that's why it is easy in the discrete data also, or in the quantitative data itself. We can visualize that particular data using tally charts or the bar charts or the pick charts. In a different ways are there to interpret it. Suppose a number of visits, you have one website and you have to see how many visits to your website, then, or if you have sown the seeds and you are going to see how many seeds are germinate, then we'll get the exact numbers. So I have sown 100 seeds and out of 100, 75 seeds are germinated. Then 75 is the count, or which is the discrete number I can say which is there. But one cannot say a 75.1 or 75.2 seeds are germinated. Such a data is called as the discrete type of the data, where we are not able to give it in a range form. Okay. So here always in a discrete data, number is fixed. If it's a continuous type of the data, then these type of the data can be broken down infinitely into the very smaller parts, we can say. And this data is broken down into smaller parts and then can be placed on a measurable scales, and where we can give some range or measures about the data. For example, here you can see the on the first photograph here, the average rainfall is given in the two cities city 1 and the city 2 is there. So in one city and the other city, we can see the rainfall pattern in a different month. Okay. So here we cannot give it in a fixed number. Here it is ranging or it is variable. So another example is if the length of piece of a string we are going to measure in the centimeters, or the temperature in the degree Celsius. They are the examples of the continuous type of the data. So discrete data, you can count it when it is discrete, and if you can't count it, if you measure it, then it is the continuous one. So as it is it is in the form of measure, temperature, weight, length, all are the continuous type of the data. And this data can fluctuate over the time period. For example, the room temperature we are going to measure, then room temperature is going to vary throughout the day. So it is the data which is varying with the different time span, with the different time period. So variables are there in the data. So such a type of the data can be presented very well using the line graph, where through the line it is we can, so from this data we can get a very good interpretation through the line graph. So suppose in this first photograph you see the rainfall pattern in the city 1 and the city 2. Then usually in both the cities, in the month of July the rainfall is quite less, and in the month of December rainfall is quite high, or in the January. So looking towards this graph, we will getting the clear idea about the pattern of rainfall in both the cities. So there are again various methods to collect the quantitative data. Very important, and the first method by performing the various experiments. There can be some controlled observations through the experiment. There can be the additionally certain we require some surveys. Okay. We need some questionnaires, some longitudinal studies like research conduct over the extended period of the time. Sometimes taking the polls or the telephonic interviews, face-to-face interviews. They are also the part of the quantitative type of the data analysis. So descriptive, casual, comparative, surveys, experimental, correlational, these are all the methods in the quantitative data collection. So descriptive research is simply which involves observing a certain variable and then describing that particular variable. Okay. So the data which is gathered from these study, a variable will likely form a hypothesis. Okay. Suppose you have seen, you have visited a particular land, or if you have visited a particular forest area, and you have noted your observations on the different types of the plants you have observed in that particular region, or the animals you have observed in the region. You may observe that near to the water bodies, the different plants are there. There are the different types of the tree species, the patterns of the grasses or stuff. Then whenever we are writing the descriptions about our observations, at last we are observing many variables, and through these observations we have noted down will likely form a hypothesis. We can get naturally we can get some hypothesis or some interpretation through that data. So it may sound a lot like a qualitative research. But what makes it quantitative is that these details are collected for the purpose of statistical analysis. Okay, so here though we have seen the different populations, but we are going to count the number of that populations, through which we can give more interpretation about the frequency, abundance, or we can say for that studied forest patch. Okay, so if a researcher is sure where to begin the study, then descriptive research is a very great place to start with the study. Casual comparative, or it is also called as the quasi-experimental research analysis data collection method, which involve studying the effect of independent variable on a dependent variable. Okay, so to determine the causality of happening of these particular, so there are always in the experimentation there are the different variables are used, and we are usually studying the impact of one variable on the other variable. So whether the impact is there or there is no impact of one variable on the other, then such a type of the experimentations are usually designed during the quantitative research. So here in this casual comparative way, it involves studying the effect of this independent variable on the dependent variable. It used to identify the cause effect relationship between these uh, independent and a dependent variable. So researcher can broke down these two into retrospective and a prospective comparative research. This retrospective means which involves the investigating a particular question after the effect has been occurred, and if it is the prospective comparative research, then it is characterized by being initiated by the research and starting with the cause and determined to analyze the effect of a particular condition or the given condition. So it is called as the prospective comparative research, where a researcher himself has given a particular condition and then he is going to study the impact of it. But here it involves investigating a particular question after the effect has been occurred. So it is an attempt to see if a specific variable does influence on the another variable or it is not. Next, again commonly used method is the survey method in the research, where and it's a very popular method, can be used in many of the sciences or in many of the streams. Survey method can be used, and every type of the institutions or the governments or the corporates to non-profits, they all are using this method of research as the survey. So usually a survey is done to get the answer or to get the feedback about a particular uh, problem, you can say here, as we are talking about the research. So, and through a feedback they are getting to the survey, and the survey may be depending on some organized questions or some already set question set is there. It will give the understanding about the group characteristics or the opinion regarding these particular frame question. So this data can be used to make the organizational changes with the confidence, or this is the one survey sheet where they are going to take one questionnaire and they are going to take answers from the people. So do you purchase a goods from which particular site? Yes or no? How old are you? Or how did you learn about? So depending on our question frame, one can make a survey sheet and he can take the people opinion or the feedback about it and collect the data. But here we are getting the data in the form of number. So how many people said yes, how many said no, okay, or how many times a particular person is visiting that site. Suppose they are taking the data, so the number. So here the data is generated in the form of a number. Then experimental, which we usually perform in the research to determine whether a cause-effect relationship exists among the variables or it is not exist among the variables. So here methods are involved in manipulating one variable to determine the change in one variable causes change in the another. Okay. So what are the variables? Variables mean it is anything in the experiment which can change or vary. Okay. So one variable is changing, whether it is causing impact on the other. So suppose you have the same example we can quote. Suppose you have given a different range of the temperature. So temperature is one variable, and if it is changing with the change in the temperature, whether it has any role on the seed germination, then variable we have kept here is the temperature. There are three types of the variables are usually considered in the experimental type of the collection. Either independent variables are there, or dependent or the controlled type of the variables are there. So suppose again this is one of the example. So suppose you have a one company and you have launched one of your product, and it goes into the market at the uh, month of November, and you have seen that your product gets sale more in the particular month. So here suppose month is October. You have one product, you have launched it, but the product has more sale in that particular month. But in that case, we couldn't necessarily conclude that the discount is the cause to a significant increase in the sale. Okay. So suppose your product came into the market, and if it is the um, clothes, or if it is lightning, and it is come in the month of November, and if it is the Diwali. Okay, or so if the discount is given in the Diwali season and the lightning sale is more, then here it is dependent to it is difficult to say whether the lightning sale is increased because of the discount or because of the uh, festival. So um, here we cannot give the clear cut answer. So for this reason, experimental research is often conducted a highly controlled setting where only one factor is changed, and all potential other interfering factors are eliminated to the study, or they are taken into study that these factors may interfere with it. So for any experiment, the characteristics of the experiment is test one variable at a one time whenever we are studying any variable. Okay. Suppose again I will come to the same example. If I am germinating the seeds, and if I am looking the effect of the temperature and the humidity together, then it's difficult that if I get increased germination rate or the decreased germination rate, whether it is due to temperature or it is because of the humidity or some lighting, anything. Uh, so in that case, it is good if we are testing one variable at once. So it must be fair and unbiased. It doesn't allow any outside factor to affect the final outcome. Um, it is help in proving the hypothesis. So by performing the experiment, we can validate the test. Whatever the hypothesis is there, that hypothesis one can uh, validate by the experiments. And we are conducting many repeated trials. We are doing the experiments in a usually we do it in a triplicate, so that whatever the results we get at the first set of the experiment when we perform it first, whether the same is repeated at the or with all the trials. So if we'll get the same result in all the trials, it will give us a firm interpretation to this data, and it helps in uh, lowering the errors in the data. So experimental methods are more reliable methods of the data collection. We can say the biggest advantage of experimental method is its unique ability to isolate the causal factors as we are performing the experiments in a very controlled condition. Okay, there are very less errors are there while performing the experiments, so we are getting more appropriate results. Reliable data can be collected. People, the researcher has himself performed the experiment and generate the data. So validity of the data is more, and that's why accuracy of the experiments are more prominent in the experimental data when we are using the experimental data. So it's more suitable, and though suitable to the problems with the heterogeneous influencing factors are involved in the study. So this is a simple example. If the temperature of water was measured at the different depth of the pond, then here independent variable is depth of the water. Okay. Dependent variable is what? It's a temperature, because temperature is going to change with the depth of water. So it's a dependent, it is depending on the depth of the water. Temperature is dependent on the water depth. So depth of the water is going to change, the temperature is going to change. And the control variable here is the same pond. We are measuring the water temperature in the same pond with the same thermometer, then that variable is the control variable. Correlational research is the method which involve observations of the two different variables to establish a statistically corresponding relation between the two different variables. It has some sort of relationship to the extent that a change in one creates some change in the other. For example, in the correlational research, it reveals the statistical relationship between the high income earner and the relocation. Okay? So here, if the problem is whether this relocation is takes place because of the high income earners, then we can get that the more people they are earning, the more likely to they are relocating or they are not relocating. Whether they are, if they are generating more income, that's why they are staying at the same place, or they are relocating to the other. So here two variables are considered. So there are three types of the correlational research are there. One is the positive, other is the negative, and third is the zero correlational research. So positive means where the two variables are used which are statistically corresponding, where an increase or नाही आहे बहुतेक सांगते थोड्या वेळ. Research methods involve the two variables which are statistically corresponding, where an increase or decrease in one variable creates a change in the other. Okay. Suppose one example is increase in workers' remuneration results in increase in the price of the goods or services or vice versa. So here, if one variable is changing, the other is also going to change. It is called as the positive correlational research. Negative is method where two variables which are statistically opposite, where increase in one variable creates a alternate effect or the decrease in the other variable. Okay. Suppose a rise in the goods services causes the decrease or the demand of that particular product or a particular that good. So here increase in the cost or increase in the price is decreasing the demand. So it is the negative impact. So it is called as the negative correlational research. And zero correlational means where both the variables are statistically connected, where change in one of the variable may not trigger or correspond or alternate the change in the other type of the variable. So positive, in this photograph you can see a positive correlational means where increase in one is increasing the other. If there is no change, a straight line is coming, then it is no correlational. and if increase in one is causing impact, negative impact on the other parameter or the other variable is going to decrease, then it is called as the negative. So through the graph also we can interpret that data. Now, again, very important is how one can process that data. What are the different techniques are there? So to process the data, editing, coding, or the tabulation is the main method, where again, whatever the data we have collected through by using the different method, that data we have to edit, we have to code it, and we have to tabulate that data. So in the editing, the researcher has to check all the collected data, and this data editing, it can be done manually like traditional tallying or with the assistance of a computer, or by combination of both. Now we are taking the help of computers mainly in editing the data, whatever the data is collected. Then that collected data has to categorize according to the different codes, and then it will get more organized. And in the process of tabulation, we'll arrange the data in a correct manner, in a particular manner, so that it is easy to interpret or give some actual figures for the data analysis. It is easy to analyze the data if it is the data is in a tabular form. So because we are getting all the variables in one place in a table, so by observing the table we can give some interpretation. So that data, it has to present or interpret. Data presentation is again very important, and it should be in a very presentable form. If the data is in the form of pictures, if it is in the form of the tables, then it will give more visual appearance about the problem. And if it is in the form of the text, only the text is written, then it is easy to get the idea about the that particular problem. So if it is only the textual data, then we have to read everything, we have to understand the problem. But if you have presented it in the form of graphs or the bar diagrams or in the tables, charts, some illustrations are there, you made some drawings or you made the maps, then it is very easy to get the visual impact of that data. So visual impact is more if we present the data in the form of all these way. So this is the table. We all know that tabulation is what? It is the very first step before the data is used for the interpretation or the analysis. Tables can be very simple or it can be complex depending on the data, how we have generated it or how many variables are there. If more and more variables are there in the study, the data is more complex, and if lesser variables are there, then data is quite simple data, so we can tabulate it in a simple way. What things one has to remember whenever we are filling the data, that analyze the connection among the details of the headings which are given in the table, checking the unusual pattern of the data and determine the reason behind it. Begin with the table number and the title, which is very important, that figure 1 or the table 1, table 2, their number in the figure. Present the significant figures, overall results, and the high or the low values, unusual pattern, that also we can give. Okay, so here this table is showing the pulse rate, that people having the pulse rate frequency is 4% of the people is having the pulse rate in between 50 to 59. 5% people are having the pulse rate 80 to 89. So from this table we are getting that for frequency, for frequency is there for 50 and 59 pulse and 70 and 79 pulse rate. Okay. So if we have presented the data in the form of a graphs, then here the focus is main on how a change in one variable related to the other variable. So in the graphs, we can show a line graph or the bar graphs or the pie graph, which we also called as the circle type of the graph. Again, uh, depending on our uh, data generated, we have to identify whether it will be presented very well in the line form or in the bar form or in the pie graph. If one has to show a trend or a change in the particular data over the time period, then line graphs are more suitable to interpret such a type of the data. For example, here you can say this is the photograph of line graph where percentage of total music sales by a method. So these are the downloads, these are the CD purchased, and these are the three streams. So these are the three variables they have used, and they have used the time span from 2011 to 2018. So in these 8-year span, how much of the music get sold by the different ways. So here through the line graph, we can see from 2011 to 2014, the more of the music gets sold through the downloads, but after 2014, it get decreased. Okay, so through the line, it is very clear. CD purchase, we have seen the 60% of the people were purchasing the CDs in the 2018, but up to 2000, in the 2011, more people were purchasing the CDs to listen the music, but at the present state of present year up to the 2017 or 18, it is decreasing. So here we can get the change or the trend in the data through the line graph. Bar graphs we can give if we have to illustrate or we have to give some comparison or in the form of amount or the quantities, then bar graphs are quite accurate to use in the interpretation. So suppose it's a month and it, on the x-axis and the sale is shown on the y-axis. So in the different months, and these are the different shades, or we can say a different products, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are whose selling is different in the different. So in the month of March, this green color product is sold very at a higher rate, we can say, or unit. More unit are sold in the March for this particular product, but in the yellow is sold at a very lower rate. So when we are giving the comparison in the form of amount or the quantities, then bar graphs are good. If we are displaying some relationship of a part to a whole, then pie graphs are quite useful. Suppose you did a survey of particular forest and you have observed a different trees, then shrubs, climbers, or the herbs, then pie graph is good to display the relationship of all these. Scattered diagrams is another way to present the data. It is a graphical representation which usually used to show the status of correlation between the two quantitative variables. There are the two variables and what is the relationship between them. For example, here in this photograph, height is plotted on the x-axis and the weight of the same person is plotted on the y-axis. Okay, and here we have counted. This photograph is showing the excuse me. BP range. But suppose we have plotted the height on the x-axis and weight on the y-axis, and we have drawn a perpendicular through that. like here, this perpendicular line is drawn. From both the points which are crossing each other, a dot is noted at the meeting point. Okay, so here these dots are. So above steps, when we are repeated for each subject and we are getting the set of dots, and the dots are concentrated around the straight line. If so, they are concentrated here along this straight line, then it indicates the correlation between the height and weight. And if these points they are not concentrated, then there may not be any relationship between it. So we are coming to the last part of this lecture. What is the importance of the quantitative data? So quantitative data gives more objective and variable information, as the data is collected in a systematic way, in a standardized manner, by performing the experiments. The results which we are getting through the quantitative data, that can be generalized to a larger population, because larger populations are studied, repetitions are there in the experiments. Researcher himself has performed or collected this data through his experimentation. So it makes an effective way to study the large set of people, or the large set of group, you can say. Numerical data allows for precise measurements and analysis, which provides more accurate results than the other methods of the data collection. This quantitative data collection allows the testing of the hypothesis or the theories, leading to a better understanding of the relationship between the variables which are considered. Quantitative data collection allows for data comparison and analysis, and it can be useful in making the decision and identifying the trends or the patterns. So one can compare between the variables in the quantitative data. Replicability is there. Numerical nature of these data makes it easier to replicate the research result, and it is very important or essential for building a knowledge in a particular field, or to interpret something. If the data is replicable, if the replicability is in the data, then it is considered as more valuable, and the validity of the data is more, or accuracy of the data is more, if the replicability is there. So thank you all of you for patience hearing for the last 2 hours. And I will again thankful to the organizers, Dr. Vishal sir and his team, his college, authorities from this science college, for giving me the opportunity to interact with the students. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I leave?
Ashish.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
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 मॅम आवाज येत आहे का?
येतोय. हा येतोय.
हो येतोय.
I think Marathi sir is not there, ma'am. So I give vote of
Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
So on behalf of Science College Research Committee and on behalf of research scholars, I express our gratitude towards Dr. Prachi Srisagar ma'am for this informative and important lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for giving us your valuable time.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You may leave now, ma'am.
Thank you.
आता क्लास आहे की नाही आता?
नाही, आता डायरेक्ट मंडेला क्लास आहे म्हणे.
ओके.
हो, ते एंड